So Back 4 Blood Swarm mode is in kind of a weird spot. It's got a lot of good things going for it, and in a lot of ways, it can be really fun. But it isn't perfect, and there's a few cracks in the design that keep it from living up to its full potential. So let's talk about that. I'm going to go over how it differs from its Left 4 Dead inspiration, give you some first impressions, and talk about what I like and didn't like about Swarm mode, and make some suggestions on how the game can be improved overall. But before we get into all that, I just want to take a second to say that the amount of support that you guys have been showing the channel over the last few months has been nothing short of incredible, and it really does mean a lot to me. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe because there's a lot of cool stuff coming up this fall. But anyways, there is a lot to talk about with the new Versus mode, so let's just get to it. So, how does Swarm mode differ from its inspiration, Left 4 Dead Survival mode? On the Ridden side of things, straight out the gate, you're going to notice two big differences. First off, you actually get to choose what kind of special infected you spawn as, or ridden I guess, but you are limited to 2 of each subclass. And then there's the mutation system. The mutation system acts as sort of a team upgrade pool, for lack of a better word. You can upgrade all of the special ridden and even the horde itself using mutation points that you unlock through each round. Everything in here is shared, so any of the upgrades that you choose are also given to everyone on the team. And you also don't have to pay for anything up front, and everyone can start putting points into certain upgrades and kind of chip away at the overall cost over time. You can pool your points basically. There's also no tank type that you can play as, which is kind of a bummer. But the last thing I want to point out about the Ridden is the new third-person perspective. This looks like it carried over from Turtle Rock's last game, Evolve, where the hunters played in first person and the monsters in third. Now let's move on to the cleaner side of things. As the cleaners, you also get a team upgrade system in the form of the cards. And at the beginning of each round, you get to choose from a deck. You can either make your own or choose from a couple presets like Medic or Soldier. The cards that you get in Versus work a little different than they do in the campaign in the sense that everyone has access to all of the same cards. This helps to prevent balancing issues and helps to just kind of keep things fair. That way everyone has access to all of the same cards and there's no advantages one way or the other. When you start as the cleaners, you essentially get 2 different time limits. You get a set time to pick your cards, and a set amount of time to run around and loot weapons and supplies before the start of each round. And one thing that I forgot to mention on how it differs from Left 4 Dead is the new Battle Royale-esque circle that forces the cleaners to possibly move out of their fortified spot and kind of move around the map. What the circle tries to do is prevent people from posting up in one shitty spot for the entire round, making matches go on forever, and making the gameplay feel really repetitive and kind of cheap. This isn't a perfect system, but I'll swing back to that later. Now let's move on to first impressions, and first off, playing this definitely took me back to my Xbox 360 roots. And that's all thanks to game chat. By default, game chat is turned on, which means that you're gonna get a lot of this, and a hell of a lot of this.
Oi, stop shouting, who do you think you are?
As annoying as that can be sometimes, honestly, I kinda missed it. There's something about a 12-year-old yelling obscenities at me that I've never heard before that just gets me feeling all nostalgic. We had a 3-man crew that night and we managed to pick up a pretty cool random that stayed with us through the entire rest of the night. And that hasn't happened to me in a long time, and that's something that I really miss about game chat being more common. But okay, how's the gameplay itself? That's where things get a little tricky. Playing as the Ridden can be pretty fun. My personal 2 favorites were the Stinger and the Wretch. The movement of the Stinger and Hawker class was just really fun. It's super satisfying being able to jump across the entire map and actually cling to the walls. The Wretch can be really good when you upgrade its overall damage, and I love filling up a room with the vomit and forcing people out of their spots. Also, the Wretch burps when you crouch, so that's pretty much an automatic win for me. The Bruisers, well, just like in campaign, they are way overpowered and kind of broken. Not only do they do massive amounts of damage, but they have a huge health pool, and unless you can hit their weak point, which is honestly kinda hard to do in the moment, they can really wreak havoc on you and your team. And at the moment, the Bruisers can hit you and do damage through walls and different barriers, which is incredibly frustrating in a game mode where you're supposed to post up and fortify somewhere. It's super cheap, and that's something that definitely needs to get fixed for launch. The strategy that worked for me and my team most of the time was putting pretty much all of our mutation points into the horde rather than our own upgrades, because you can unleash some serious cheese on the other team once you get it to a high enough level. You can upgrade the size of the hordes and their spawn frequency, make them faster, do more damage, have armor, and even spawn in the blighted ridden that explode into pools of acid once they die. If you're posted up inside, this can be really difficult and kind of honestly frustrating to go up against because there's really nothing that you can do to fight it. If you can get blighted ridden in the horde, that's really the best way to take people down. Now, I want to circle back around to the Swarm Circle because there's honestly a lot to talk about there. So, like I said, it's not the best system, and there's a few reasons why. Again, what the Circle tries to do is ensure that people can't post up in the same cheap spot every time for the entire match. It also adds a little element of unpredictability to the gameplay. But the thing is that each team plays on a different map every round, which leads to the issue of sometimes one team has it easier than the other team. Each map is very different, and some work better for the cleaners than others. The circle also doesn't follow the same path every time, which can make things unfair. I ran into plenty of situations where I felt like our team kinda got screwed over by the map and circle path, and then the other team had a much easier go of it. So the logical solution to this would be to make both rounds take place on the same map with the same circle direction. But now you run into the issue of whoever goes second gets the advantage of knowing exactly where the circle is going to end up, and then they're able to fortify that position a lot better and a lot easier than the first team. Although that isn't perfect either, I do think that having the map and the circle path be the same each round makes things a little bit more fair. I ran into plenty of situations where we felt like our team kind of got screwed over by the map and the circle path, and then the other team had a much easier go of it. And that doesn't really make for a fun experience. Now, the beta had a pretty massive issue with not only starting matches with full and even teams, but there was an even bigger issue with people leaving the games. I found that the vast majority of my matches had uneven teams, and that was honestly really frustrating. I know it was a beta and that will probably be better in the final release, but I can still see players leaving matches being an issue regardless. Not that the current bot's AI would be much help, but when someone leaves and a bot doesn't fill in, you're just kinda down a teammate. Possibly my biggest criticism of this game mode right now is the amount of downtime between each round. First you have to matchmake, load into your match, players have to pick their cards and loadouts, then the cleaners get to spawn in and they get their time to loot. And in the meantime, the Swarm team just kind of has to sit around until the round finally starts. Even in an age where battle royales have taken over the industry, which are pretty much just you waiting for 2 minutes to die and repeat, it's a lot of downtime, especially when you have to do it between every single round. And the whole idea behind the game mode is to kill the other team as fast as you can, which on the flip side means that the objective is to play for as little time as possible. So if you manage to get a pretty good time in say under a minute, you waited all that time for less than a minute of gameplay. Playing with some of my good friends, I didn't really notice it as much because basically you get a couple minutes to bullshit with your buddies. But when I played by myself, oof, it burnt me out pretty quickly. Really, this isn't something that can be easily fixed either because it's pretty integral to the design of the game mode. Another pretty big annoyance that I ran into is the invisible barriers. There are so many and the game doesn't really do a good job at telling you where they are. There's plenty of places that look like you should be able to jump across and move around out there, but instead you just kind of run headfirst into an invisible wall and it can really take you out of the moment. There were also a couple times where I got totally screwed over by it, especially when you play as the Hawker. It can feel pretty limiting. This map in particular is really bad with them. They're all over and their placement isn't obvious until you run into them. When you play as the Swarm, I don't really see why you can't go out here to spawn or hide. If anything, just put a soft kill barrier out there that gives you a timer to return to the battlefield like other games. These hard barriers can make the maps feel really small. At their best, they can unimmerse you, and at their worst, they can get you killed. So now I want to round off here by giving some of my final thoughts on Swarm mode and weigh the good and the bad. Overall, I did have a lot of fun with the mode. It's pretty fun to just grab some of your friends and hop into games. It's really fun to play as the Swarm specifically, and I like all the abilities that each of them have. Other than the Bruiser, I thought for the most part they were balanced pretty well. I'm mixed on the mutation and the card system. I like the idea of it, but after you play a couple matches, you pretty much just end up picking the same stuff every round, so it doesn't really feel like it gives you that amount of variety and replayability that Turtle Rock is really trying to push. If anything, I just kind of feel like it adds an unnecessary amount of downtime to the game, and that can really wear you down after a while. I've seen a lot of division in the community about the card system alone, so I don't think it's hitting the mark that Turtle Rock intended it to. Swarm mode is cool on its own, but it suffers from a plethora of issues, and I don't think that it has the same legs as the Left 4 Dead style of versus. It is not a suitable replacement for campaign versus, and the community has been pretty vocal about that. Let's be honest though, I can easily see campaign versus being added in down the road, but it's just a shame that it's becoming so damn common for features that should be there to be pulled from launch and added in as extra or new content down the road. Where have I seen that before? At the end of the day, I just think that Back 4 Blood tries to do too much, and I think that some of these new features miss the mark a little bit. Its complexity and its approach to variety and replayability is something that I covered in my last video, and I still hold to that. I am curious to see what you guys think of the new versus mode, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you made it through and enjoyed, be sure to leave a like on the video because it does help my small channel out, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find me on Twitter @NickRespawns. Thanks for checking out the video, guys, and until next time, have a good one.